Security. The moderator of panel 2 is Dr. Jianchun Wang, the Vice President of Zhonghua Institution for Economic Research. Our first panelist is Dr. Maria Solis. She is the Director of the Center for Asia Policy Studies and Knight Chair in Japan Studies of the Brookings Institution. And the second panelist is Dr. Xinhong Chen. He is the Vice President of the CIER and the Director of our second research division. I'll give the floor to Vice President Wang. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good day, everyone. Director Solis and Vice President Chen and honorable guest speakers and all the delegates from Brookings Institution took all the way, long journey to Taipei, and welcome. It's a great honor to chair this session. The topic of this session is about innovation and economic securities. In general, economic security covers the issues like the privacy and the leakage of technology, intellectual property right, and some of the holding out of industries due to the foreign direct investment, as well as the threat of supply disruption or export restriction on essential materials. And naturally for Taiwan, that economic securities covers that the issues that cross-trade tensions, as well as some of the weakening China economy and its potential threats. And in addition to that, because of the Trump's that will take office in early January, so it casts some doubts and uncertainty from Taiwan's economic securities. So facing the risk of geopolitical policies, Trump's take office again and the weakening of China economy, Taiwan must leverage its advantage in semiconductors and the benefits of complete supply chain to design some higher labor strategies. As far as I'm concerned, I think the United States want to rejuvenate manufacturing sectors. Taiwan probably is the best cooperation partner without suspension because of Taiwan's very extensive, very complete supply chain industrial cluster, not only in automobile parts, petrochemicals, machinery, as well as information electronics and ICT and IT. Semiconductor industries. And also because Taiwan has abundant financial capitals, as well as Taiwan is very loyal to trading partner and loyal to democracy. So I think Taiwan is the best cooperation partner for states to make Americans manufacture or the whole country great again. And also, so for examples that through cooperation with the states in the U.S.-Taiwan Trade Initiative to assist America in rebuilding its semiconductors and manufacturing industry in exchange for support for Taiwan's semiconductors and tariff reduction. This might be the possible to encourage Trump from the more like anti-China to pro-Taiwan. I think this is something that the government should take seriously. So in this session, I will invite two very prestigious scholars from think tanks. One is from Brookings and one is from Zhonghua Institution for Economic Research. And they can provide so in-depth analysis and also very insightful perspectives. And so let's welcome most speakers with a warm round of applause. And the first speaker from Brookings is Director Maria Solis, who is Asian policy, the Director for Asian Policy Studies and also the Knight Chair of in Japan Studies. And on my far left is Vice President Chen, who is specialized in industrial policy, technology policies, and also is also vice president and the director for international economic divisions. So I will just open the free talks on these issues, maybe for 10 to 15 minutes for each panelist. And then if we have time, then we will ask some short questions and short answers. Okay, then promise that Dr. Solis will go first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President Chang. And I want to express, first of all, my appreciation to the Tsinghua Institution for Economic Research for partnering with us in this event. And it's truly a pleasure to be back in Taiwan. I'm looking forward very much to the conversation today on technology and economic security. And I think I've been gathering this afternoon that understandably there's a lot of interest as to what the Trump administration will do when it comes to foreign economic policy, trade, economic security, with what consequences for Asia and for Taiwan in particular. And I promise you that I'll get there. But I think before I do that, it's important to provide context as to what kind of moment are we going through. And I think that will hopefully help illuminate some of the pressing issues that confront us. And then I'll get to the question of what might we expect, what are some educated guesses as to what the Trump administration may be doing when it comes to these important areas. And I think that this context that I want to provide come in, and I'll be very, very brief. One is, I think that it's very important that we realize that we're living in a completely different era because we're going through what I would characterize as the securitization of international economic relations. That is, the fusion of economics and national security is now a prevalent trend. And I would like to explain a bit as to why we're there. But secondly, I think that this economic security trend has had truly profound implications for how the United States implements, conceives, designs its foreign economic policy. So I'm going to try to talk about what are these new parameters of U.S. Foreign economic policy. So why then this fusion of economics and national security? And the way I like to go about this, to be very brief, is that I think, quite frankly, that we're going through the perfect storm. The risk environment has changed in profound ways. There are system-wide stressors that are hitting us from different directions. First of all, there's no surprise. All of these factors, you're probably very aware of them, but certainly great power competition between the United States and China is a key determinant. But the fact that you have these two large powers now thinking of each other as a competitor, but after they have built very substantive economic relations. So this fact of deep economic interdependence between two powers that are now more skeptical of each other, I think very much colors the present era. Add to that the very fast process of technological change. We're going through a technological revolution where you see what some people refer to as platform technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, microelectronics, biotechnology. And these are technologies that are touching every area of our economies, our societies, our politics. And they're very important for economic competitiveness. They're very important for military readiness. And these are technologies that are changing quickly. Of course, there have been shocks to the system, and I'm referring, first of all, to the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the vulnerabilities to supply chains that were exposed then. And I think that has made us more mindful about what happens when you have these vast networks, regional production networks that then suffer some of these shocks. And another kind of shock that now is becoming more pressing, and I think was the topic of the last panel, and that is increasing instability, global instability, the conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in the Middle East, and of course a tense situation here in the Indo-Pacific. So I think that the combined effect of this growing risk environment is that we see this securitization of international economic relations. And one way in which this is manifested is that I think more and more governments are really prioritizing trying to be on the technological edge. So investing in advanced manufacturing ecosystems, trying to nurture these emerging technologies. And they see these not just part of a growth and innovation agenda, but also as part of their national security priorities. Added to that, I think, is also this resilience agenda that has gained a lot of prominence, where now we see that there's a different calculus, that efficiency is not the only way in which international transactions are judged, but hedging against the potential risks of economic interdependence. And now we have an entire new lexicon of weaponized interdependence and choke points. And I think that also illustrates how different is the place that we're at today. And second point about background, and I'm about to go into the Trump administration in a minute, but I do think that this economic security turn has been embraced with gusto by the United States. And this has really become a key priority in American foreign policy. And the way I tried to very briefly explain what is happening is that I see three major tracks where American foreign economic policy is now embarking on this economic security path. One would be the protection side. And the idea is that the United States now considers these dual sensitive technology is critical, and as I'll explain in a minute, has embarked on a new set of technology restrictions guided by a new set of goals of what it means to compete with China on technology. So this awareness that these technologies that are commercially widely available nevertheless have national security implications is something that we should not lose track of. Then there is not only the protect side, but also the promote side. And again, the fact that the United States now is practicing industrial policy with the Science and Chips Act and is then offering subsidies and investment incentives to try to build these ecosystems. And something that I think is more of a question mark for the Trump administration, but what's certainly a key priority for the Biden administration is not just protect, promote, but also partner. And the idea that it was critical to work with like-minded partners to build relations of trust. Because if the risk environment is growing, then trust becomes a more desired way in which you think about how you build these economic transactions in the most sensitive arenas. Now, I would end this quick overview just by highlighting two, I think, really important developments in the United States. And one has to do with the protection of sensitive technology. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan gave a very important speech where he articulated what are the end goals, or what is the guiding philosophy, if you will, of the Biden administration when it comes to technology competition with China. And what he said is that given China's civil-military fusion practices, it's not sufficient for the United States to just seek relative advantage, but should try to create the largest possible lead and to delay Chinese technological development, because the concern is that, again, widely available advanced commercial technologies could be siphoned off for military uses. This is a very important redefinition of what it takes to compete with China. One that every time I come to this region, I ask our partners, are you on board with this view or not? And I think that's an important conversation to be had. And the second, I think, very important track, as I mentioned before, is the industrial policy track, and in particular the Chips and Science Act. And President Biden was at Brookings last week. He gave an important speech where he talked about this as one of his most significant legacies or contributions, and he highlighted that because of the Science and Chips Act, a wave of investment materialized in the United States. And of course, we know that Taiwan was a key partner in that endeavor. The figure that President Biden offered was $350 billion of investment in these projects to build an advanced semiconductor ecosystem. I would say that this is very impressive, but it's just the first step. And that we don't know yet, and I'm looking forward very much to the comments of Vice President Chen and Vice President Wang on this, whether these grand experiment to build these advanced semiconductor system will work out or not. We know that, questions are about, are we really investing in the right technologies? Are we addressing the talent pipeline issue? Are we really creating a cost-competitive semiconductor system in the United States? All these are questions. But one important question is that American domestic politics keep shifting. And this brings me to what President-elect Trump might do on these important arenas of economic policy, trade, tariffs, and economic security. So when I come to this part of my remarks, you will notice I come with question marks for all of you. I don't come with firm assessments, because I honestly feel that I could not give you that, because quite frankly, there's a lot of uncertainty. But I hope that the questions that I pose here in front of all of you help us try to have an informed discussion as to what this might mean. And my first question is whether we might see a renewed trade war with China. And, of course, when you have a president who thinks that the word tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, that obviously has very serious implications, important implications for every economy in this corner of the world that is deeply integrated, that has risen through the existing patterns of trade. And we know that President Trump already in his first term had a testy relationship with China, that they embarked on a tit-for-tat on a trade war that actually covered a very substantial amount of the U.S.-China bilateral trade flow. Now, President Biden mostly maintained those tariffs. Those China tariffs became became politically untouchable. And in fact, President Biden, not long ago, added to those tariffs when he went for higher duties on electric vehicles and solar panels. So we already have a lot of punitive tariffs when it comes to the U.S.-China relationship. Question is, and I start with my questions, what will Trump do next? And he has talked about a 60% tariff now, on top of all the things that I have been describing. There have been conversations in Trump's orbit about perhaps stripping away China's MFN status, and there are a number of other ideas. And of course, anything that happens in the U.S.-China economic relationship is not a dance of two, because we know, given the existing patterns of trade, global supply chains, Taiwanese, Korean, Japanese, firms from all over the world are also going to be affected. So I would say that I think we have clarity on one thing. Trump likes tariffs. And we know that he's going to implement some of those tariffs. But I would say that to me what is most intriguing is that we don't know what is the strategy that would be behind the idea that you would go for these massive 60% tariffs on China. And that's an important question to ask. Because one possibility is that he wants to pick up from where he left. Because you see, the United States and China did negotiate a stage one trade agreement. And the idea was, when you label something stage one, that there's going to be a second stage. And the idea is that in that second trade deal, that the most difficult issues would be on the table. The structural reforms, the core of, Chinese violations of intellectual property, the role of state-owned enterprises, subsidies, all these very, very difficult issues. I don't see anything that would give me hope or the idea that President Xi at this current moment would be interested in negotiating away the tenets of state capitalism in China. So I don't think that these 60% tariffs would actually have much hope of addressing the deeper structural issues. So then what if he just wants to have a second trade agreement that is very much like the first one? It's a managed trade approach, and he just wants China to buy more things from the United States. And maybe that's where we end up. But again, if you look at what happened to stage one U.S.-China trade agreement, it was a very hollow agreement. China did not follow through in purchasing the $200 billion of U.S. products. So to repeat a failure, I'm not sure it's a very good proposition. The other possibility is he wants to do this to try to bring industry away from China into the United States. I would argue that tariffs are a very blunt instrument that will not get you there, because that did not happen during the first Trump administration when tariffs were the way in which they moved forward. That wave of investment that I just mentioned from the Chips and Science Act is because President Biden did coordinate a set of incentives. It cannot just be the punishment. You must have the carrot if you're going to bring that investment. So again, this is going to be, I think, a testy relationship, but the fundamental goal of what is the strategy behind it has not even been broached or addressed, and we should be asking that question. Which brings me to the second question. I promise I only have two more. The second question is, will we see rekindled trade friction with our partners and allies? And I think that this is where the universal tariff may come in, the idea of a 10 or to 20% tariff. And equally, is the same case here, that we don't know exactly to what end would these tariffs be used and in what manner. Are they going to be just a negotiation tactic? Are they going to be then proposed or threatened so that countries come to the table and negotiate something? Is there going to be a priority list of countries that have the largest trade deficits with the United States are sort of on a waiting list, just waiting to be called for these negotiations to happen? And quite frankly, does the United States have the manpower, the administrative resources to really undertake this wave of trade negotiations that supposedly this threat of a universal tariff is hinting at? And I think my concern here is that if we get into a trade friction with our partners, it's going to be very difficult to then move forward on the coordination that we do need to pursue our goals on the economic security front, on the technology competition front. Now, my last question, and Vice President Wang really laid out the importance of the economic security agenda, is what is going to be the Trump administration philosophy or strategy when it comes to the technology restrictions. And I would say that, you could make the case of continuity, because there is also significant continuity between the Trump administration and the Biden administration in the export control arena. In many ways, the first initiatives on this front were undertaken during the Trump administration. That's when emerging technologies were incorporated into the export controls. That's when the United States began to use in a very novel way the foreign direct product rule, so that anything that was produced by a foreign company, if they touched American software or equipment, could be subject to these restrictions. That's when Huawei was placed in the entity list. But President Trump introduced also a lot of uncertainty on that export control first move, because as he was pursuing negotiations with China, sometimes he softened the language, sometimes he intervened to give some reprieve to ZTE and so forth. Now, as I mentioned earlier, President Biden has systematized the approach, has made it far more comprehensive with a set of export control rules. The last one just took place last December. And the question then is before us. What is President Trump going to do? Is he going to prioritize tariffs because that's where his heart seems to be? Or is he going to keep the eye on the ball? Because I do think that the longer term repercussions are going to be much larger when we're talking about the technology competition. And will he be able to be disciplined, and because it's a very dense, abstract, technical field, and let the agencies deal with the policy, or will he be intervening depending on how he's feeling about Xi Jinping at different moments of his presidency? So maybe I should end here with my initial remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. So elaborate a little bit details on the environment has been changing, especially the risky technology advancement, and also the trade-off between the economic growth and the securities, and also just explain the three major trends like protection and promotion of IC industry, sensitive technologies, and also the new industrial policy, and so on, and also raise three questions about how the new China trade war and also export control rule, as well as trade friction with allies. So probably that later we'll just come on, ask you several other questions. And then we just probably that Dr. Chen will just comment on these issues.
As a members of CIER, I guess I don't need to thank CIER for inviting me to this conference, because I was asked, like TSMC was asked to invest in the United States. But I do need to thank Mira's speech, because he helped me to lay out the context from which I can, move further to discuss the issue involved. I think right after Trump won the election, all the think tanks in Taiwan has done a lot of homework. Even lay people, get to know Trump's policy proposal better than ordinary American voters. So we know that what kinds of situation we could be facing in the near future. I think the general idea is that tariff could be raised. Even leading firms like TSMC could be asked to invest more in the United States. Even TSMC's supply chain could follow suit. So we are concerned about the extent to which TSMC and its value chain will be anchored or even localized within the United States. So it looks like some kinds of hopeless situation. So I wanted to try to take you away a little bit from these kinds of stereotypes issues. Because it seems to me that when it comes to the so-called strategic competition between the United States and Americans, there are other issues than the trade aspects. Especially Mira just talked a lot of those complicated issues involved. I think even you wanted to so-called de-risk, even choke off China, there could be different kinds of narratives for different kinds of sectors. So first of all, I would like to draw your attention to a report released by Mark Rubio in September, in this year, September. Yeah. At that time, he was just a senator, but he is going to be the Secretary of State in next. Okay. In that report, the report is titled "The Words China Made in China 2025, 9 years later." With that report, he evaluated the progress China has made for the so-called Made in China 2025. He looks into the 10 sectors involved. Eventually, his assessments suggest that China actually has conquered 4 sectors, including electric vehicle, energy and power generation, shipbuilding, and high-speed rails. All these sectors have much to do with China's internal domestic consumption. So it stimulates and magnifies the so-called internal economic circulations. Yeah. And then he also pointed out that in 5 sectors, China has partially accomplished its goals. The sectors are aerospace and aviation, biotechnology, new material, robotics and machinery, and then semiconductors. Even within these 5 sectors, he pointed out that China actually is the leader in drone. China captured 90% of the U.S. market in drone. Also, even for the semiconductor industry, the United States actually devotes a lot of resources to choke off China for the so-called advanced fabrication. But China is in a position to dominate the so-called latency chips. So he ended up, by the conclusion that this serves some kind of wake-up call for different high-level decision makers in the United States. Rubio called for a so-called a whole of society effort to rebuild the United States Americans. So for me, when I went through this report, a clear message for me is that the United States does not enjoy leading ages advantage in every technology sector's concerns. In Taiwan, we come to pay high attention on the semiconductor industry. Yeah, you look at the semiconductor sectors closely. United States, the clear leader in EDA tools, in intellectual property, even in some equipment. But still, United States got to, work together with a few partner countries, including Taiwan, South Korea, the Netherlands, to choke off China for the so-called advanced chips. The other area that you wanted to choke off China is the so-called AI. Of course, you have quite a substantial advantage in this kind of foundation model. You probably also enjoy some advantage in the so-called computing power. But still, you see the rise of China in this field is quite fast. So somehow that's why the bipartisan, report from the Congress actually proposed the idea of the so-called Manhattan-like project for AI. But when it comes to these other sectors like 5G, 6G, drone, even electric vehicle, China probably has some kinds of leading advantage. Yeah. Of course, you want to try to separate yourself from China. So for 5G, you proposed the idea of the so-called Open RAN. You wanted to do the so-called clean network. No Chinese product or some kinds of components are involved in the so-called mobile communication networks. But look at the so-called 6G. China actually, Huawei is the leading players. They claim more than 40% of the so-called 6G patents. Yeah, every year. Yeah, for the 6G. So what I wanted to suggest that we got to bear in mind that the strategic competition between China and United States have different kinds of scenarios, different kinds of narratives. You don't enjoy the so-called advantages in every field involved. So that's why it's quite possible that Taiwan and the United States, even some other country, can still work with the United States in order to prevail in a certain sector that you could be, lagging behind for these moments. So we need to take this perspective further so we can try to keep ourselves from the so-called, the stereotypes scenario. We need to invest in the United States only. We need to, face the high tariff. So there are other issues involved. So with that, I think we probably there could be a way out of these kinds of difficult situations. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for talk about a lot of future perspective and China and states as competition in some key areas. So right now I have questions that because I'm sorry, I just pronounced Mirena, right? Dr. Soros. Because the first one question is that because Trump says that the tariff is the most beautiful language in his vocabulary or something like that. So, but right now he just imposed tariff probably that 25% on Canada and also Mexico, but only 10% for China, right? So will that be the tariffs a common practice or a bargaining strategy to pressure your trading partner to give in or something like that? This is my question. The second question is that I think we talk about the decoupling or de-risk, because in Trump's cabinet members that also they have a different thinking. The first one is decoupling. The second one is de-risk. Because if the decoupling means that it will impose 60% of tariff on China, then that will cause very serious impact for China because right now it's a very weakening economy. So, but in Taiwan, what we worry about is that if the decoupling and then make serious impact on China, probably that China is that harder to fix domestic problem. Will that be they just switch the focus to deal with Taiwan in various ways? Because if you solve the internal problem is harder than just deal with Taiwan, will be demonstrate to Taiwan's economy as well as securities. So, yeah, please.
Thank you very much. We should be very cautious in predicting exactly what move will President Trump make on tariffs. And, because he likes the word, he used it a lot when he is expressing frustration about a specific policy issues. That 10% on China, I think, was particularly related to the fentanyl issue. So I think he's thinking of that separately from 60%, but it's hard to tell exactly what he's thinking. And the same thing with Canada and Mexico. And given that Canada and Mexico are very, very important trading partners of the United States, even though the threatened level of tariff is lower, the economic impact would be huge and also would have a very significant negative effect on the USMCA, because then what happens, you have a trade agreement and then you go ahead and invoke punitive tariffs. Where does that leave you? Where does that leave the integrity of the trade agreement? Now, I think that there's going to be a lot of bluster. I imagine that President Trump would like to see some negotiations take place. He also prides himself of being a deal maker. So it could be that this is just the opening salvo to start a conversation, and these negotiations can be about many different things. Okay. But in my mind, it also opens the possibility. Everybody understands that President Trump cares about these things, and our counterparts can also take advantage of these to, promise a lot and do little, and then use his time that way. I mean, when President Trump said this thing about a 25% tariff on Mexico, the Mexican president got on the phone and promised cooperation on several border issues. Where any of that comes to pass, who knows? But President Trump came away from that conversation feeling better about it. And I worry that that's not the most productive use of the president's attention, of the focus of our diplomacy. And certainly, if we're all here guessing what this might do, it does create a lot of uncertainty. And we know that what businesses need to do to be effective, to be efficient, is to know what are the rules of the game. Yeah. And I think that that's a price that President Trump might be paying. And he does look at the stock market, and if people become disgruntled by all these constant pronouncements about tariffs threats, that's certainly not good for him. So I think he will have to choose at some point, and it will depend also on what his economic advisors tell him to do. and whether he pays attention or not.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and then I have a question for Xin Hong. I think you talk about a lot of strength comparison between the States and China. Would that be possible for like Taiwan's cooperation, the feasibility of cooperation with States, because Taiwan's have strength in IC industry? If we have some feasibility to cooperate with States, probably that can just take a big jump in front of China, and in what areas would be most possible?
Okay, Miranda just talked that Donald Trump is some kind of tariff man. Yeah, but also President Ross also mentioned that it could be some kinds of negotiation tactics. So eventually, what Trump wants could be the major issue, behind his bargains. But for me, so a few weeks ago, I heard Yang Yingchao suggest that if you want to deal with Trump, you got to come out with some kinds of win-win game as a kind of proposal. Yeah. So that's why what I just say is that if United States are lagging behind in certain areas, like drone, there could be some kinds of area that Taiwan can work together with the United States. Because you need some kinds of complementary assets, complementary capability for you to prevail in this sector. So, I think it's about 10 years ago, I conducted a report for the European Commission. The report was, to look into the so-called ICT R&D in Asia and in Taiwan in particular. In that report, I draw a conclusion that when the European Union, are concerned about the ICT R&D gap between the United States and the EU, then they should be worried more. Because a lot of ICT R&D in Taiwan and East Asia strongly support the ICT R&Ds in the United States. That's why we have been working together with the American, for the American to prevail in the certain sector. Like we have seen in the so-called AI chips and the AI data center solutions. There must be some kinds of area that we can work out these kinds of win-win proposal. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just, because I think that the states want to regenerate the manufacturing industries. As far as my concern is that if a country is that too early deindustrialization, probably will cause some of uneven income distribution. This is what happening in states, right? So I think probably that I just propose the idea is that can Taiwan just help the states in restart the manufacturing industry in some of key sectors? I think it would be a win-win strategy because Taiwan have very strong industrial cluster and very strong complete supply chain. So if some area we can probably take the bridge of 21st trade initiative between Taiwan and the states, I think we can build a roadmap and then just probably that we can change the Trump administration's mentalities that from the anti-China might become more friendly to Taiwan or something like that. Will that be possible?
Thank you very much. I think that there are a number of elements to your question, so I'll just address them in no specific order. I do think that there's a lot of potential for, in this new chapter of industrial policy, to think of it not as a zero-sum proposition, but to think about complementary capabilities that can help build these ecosystems among trusted partners. And I'm thinking not just about Taiwan and the United States, but given the work I do also Japan, and the fact that TSMC, for example, has invested in Arizona, but also has had, I think, a good start in Japan. And the difference here is that in this new era of industrial policy, it's taking place post the global supply chain revolution. And that means that you're not trying to create national champions that just export whole products. The semiconductor supply chain is so vast and so complex that no one economy can be the most competitive on all segments of the supply chain. So, for example, Japanese companies have a strong expertise on chemicals and advanced materials and some production equipment, the United States on design, and I think that the TSMC model of the foundry has not been beaten. It's the best in class. So I think that that's why the United States is inviting TSMC, Japan is inviting TSMC, and you begin to then create these synergies that I think can be very advantageous to all parties. Now, does this change President-elect Trump's views on China and the United States? Well, that's going to be, first of all, there's the madman theory in the sense that he wants to be unpredictable to begin with, but also his views on China are not just going to be affected by what happens in his relationship with Taiwan. They're going to be affected, and by issues of economic security, they're going to be affected by a host of other areas, and whether, for example, he thinks China can be useful to him in securing some legacy-making accomplishments. I think that he's going to be, thinking whether China can be helpful in resolving some international crisis. I'm not very optimistic, but he probably will be exploring that. And I think that my recommendation, my humble recommendation would be to focus on the strength of the partnership that the United States and Taiwan and Japan and other trusted partners can build, as opposed to moving him from anti-China to more friendly to Taiwan. I think that building those strong foundations will have longer-term benefits.
Okay, thank you. But I need to mention is that IC industry is a good start. But IC industry actually is the high value add, but cannot create a lot of jobs. So I have a question for Dr. Chen, is that because Taiwan right now is that we have another problem is that we just too unbalanced growth. We just skewed toward IC industries, but our tradition is not doing quite well. So I think if the geopolitics affect Taiwan's semiconductor industry, it will be too heavy for Taiwan to come to bear. And how will Taiwan deal with that? And is any industry that can stand out besides IC industries?
That's $1 million question. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but what I wanted to say is that with or without Trump, we always need to address this issue. Yeah. Taiwan faces a serious issue of the so-called geopolitics. We also have a lot of internal constraints in terms of net zero, in terms of green energies. So we do need these kinds of transformations. Yeah, okay.
Okay, since time is running out, so I think we just stop this session here. And thanks again for just let's get a round of applause to two speakers.
Thank you. We would like to thank Vice President Wang for hosting the panel, and also we would like to thank Director Solis and Vice President Chen for delivering outstanding and very informative presentations and conversations. Thank you. So please give them a big applause again. Thank you. We are about to move into the Q&A session, but before we do that, our staff needs a little time to make some adjustments on stage, so please bear with us. Thank you. Now, it is time for the Q&A session. We would like to invite all the speakers and panelists to the stage. The moderator of Q&A session is President Xianming Lian. I will leave the floor to President Lian. Thank you.
Okay, so this is going to be the last session. I think we have about 20-25 minutes. And so if you want to ask a question, please just tell us your question and also the person that you want to address the question to. And it would be extremely rare opportunity. You actually are going to see such a distinguished delegates from the Brookings. And so if you had a question, please raise your hand and, okay, go ahead. Yes.
Hi, my name is Sam Chang. I'm the founder of Negative Vote Association in Taiwan. It's an NGO dedicated to democracy reform. My question specifically for Mr. Haas and also for Dr. Ho is that you both have somewhat touched on the issue of TSMC and its move to the United States. And my question is that it is clearly, from my perspective, not to Taiwan's advantage to do so, right? Morris Chang have said, he has said that the cost of doing business in the United States is 50% more. So clearly it's not something that TSMC is willing to do. So is there any way for Taiwan to prevent TSMC from moving further to the United States? Is there any way that we can resist that? For example, what if Trump says, oh, you have to move the headquarters here too? Is there any way we can resist that? That's my question. Thank you.
That's a very difficult question.
Well, thank you, Sam, for your question. I will take a stab at this by saying, first of all, Morris Chang, I interviewed him when he made the statement. And I recall very vividly that he said that it's a bad deal for TSMC. And I think that his views are very important. But TSMC, even though the costs are higher in the United States, it's still profitable in the United States to produce. So this isn't an act of altruism, this is an act of commercial self-interest. Second, Taiwan is limited by 3 constraints in its ability to produce: land, labor, and energy. It's going to be very difficult to overcome those constraints, and Taiwan is incapable of meeting global demand solely by producing in Taiwan. If TSMC wants to maximize its profit to meet global demand, it's going to need to produce outside of Taiwan, even as it continues to produce its most cutting-edge chips and drive its innovation inside Taiwan. And so it's a commercial decision for TSMC. I think that they've made a decision to maximize their profit by meeting as much of global demand as they are able to, which requires them to produce both in Taiwan, where they will remain headquartered, but also outside of Taiwan.
Well, I think it's a commercial decision based on political consideration. That's my guess. If TSMC really wants to maximize shareholders' value, it shouldn't have gone there. But then think about that. If someday Taiwan goes under, TSMC, if solely based on Taiwan, would dissolve. And nowadays it has invested in the United States, Germany, and Japan. I think TSMC can continue. So political consideration, either it's based because of from the American pressure or because of cross-strait tensions, I think justifies this decision.
But I'm sorry you didn't understand
I'm sorry.
my question, though. My question is there further pressure on TSMC to do even more than what it wants to? Is there any way for us to resist it?
I guess I think because actually TSMC invests in states, we also have advantages. The first one, because still 87% of the production value actually is located in Taiwan. Second one is that because if we just move to states, to Germany, because near customers. The third one is avoid the geopolitical risk. The fourth one is that because Taiwan, actually we have 5 shortages: manpower, labor, and water, electricity shortages. So can release some of the shortages here. But the reasons that we need to build an ecosystem, just without holding out, because we invest in states, Germany, we can also import some technology, business model back to Taiwan without holding out. This is the best strategy. Otherwise, we just prevent, you cannot avoid geopolitical dangers.
Okay, next question. Yes.
Thank you very much for all of your sharings. Really appreciate that. My questions, today I have 2 interconnected questions, and it's open for all of you, so please feel free to make any comments. My first question concerns weaponized interdependence, and my second question concerns international partnerships. So my first question is, as we mentioned today, the world is transitioning, and it seems like the rule-based order is semi-collapsing, and power politics is gaining popularities. And people often look at how Washington and how Beijing and even Moscow, how they react, but people seldom focus on how the small states and even medium states, how they try to react to those paradigm shifts. So my question is it possible for Trump's grand vision to backfire? Is it possible to, for the interdependencies around the world to be further weaponized, or is it actually another way around? And my second question is actually interconnected, concerns with the international partnerships of the United States, because in the past, the United States tries to collaborate with their allies through what they call like-minded partners, which constructively speaking, it's based on narratives. And I was wondering if Trump inaugurated next year, would that be, is there any changes to this? And if so, how will the new international collaboration mechanism change? And how should small countries like Taiwan react to that? Thank you.
Yes. Can we collect another round of the questions? Yes.
Francis Lee from private sector. Well, I would like this question gonna pose to Dr. Ryan. Since many people understand President-elect Trump actually based on his first term performance, we can tell he's a bit unpredictable, and maybe he won't trust the bureaucracy of the United States, their collective wisdom. So how do you see the geopolitics gonna play? Will it only play a marginal role in the second term Trump administration? Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is William Ankers. I'm a graduate student here at National Taiwan University, and my question is mainly directed at is that better?
Yes.
Yes. So my name is William Ankers, and I'm a graduate student here at National Taiwan, in Taiwan at National Taiwan University. And my question is mainly directed at the Brookings Institute, but I think anybody could answer it. And it's that Chairman Haas, he mentioned that the rules-based international order is collapsing, and that there's more of a blurry lines between which camp different countries are in, and that a lot of countries are trying to play off the U.S. and China competition to see what they can get out of it. And I'm just curious, what do you think the future of the international system will be, in the sense of what would replace the rules-based international order? Because obviously the post-Cold War order, it's gone, it didn't work. So what would be, would it be a more multipolar world order, or would there be a greater role for China or the European Union or India or some of these rising powers in that in the international system? Thank you.
The last one? Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm Olivia, and I work for the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research. My question is about the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade, which, as I'm sure you know, is a landmark event between U.S. and Taiwan. And the first 5 chapters just came into full force a week or so ago. But I'm wondering, since this was a Biden administration initiative, how likely you think it is that the final 7 chapters will be negotiated and or come into force? And if you believe that's still likely to happen, then what kind of timeline are we looking at? Thank you.
Happy to tackle 2 of the questions, and then I let Ryan and my colleagues address the others. And to the first question about the agency of smaller economies and actors in these more contested international system, and whether they matter or not at all, I actually think they matter greatly. And a lot of the work I do is precisely with the goal of going beyond the focus on U.S.-China competition, because I think that that's certainly important, but they're not the only advanced technological players that will matter. And I have a project now that looks at Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan on their economic security strategies. And I think that in the case of Japan, of course, they have many, many challenges, but in many ways they have been front runners in developing the conceptual design of what an economic security strategy looks like. And they have coined a couple of terms that I think are interesting, of a strategic autonomy and a strategic indispensability. They have now standalone the Economic Security Promotion Act, and they have tried to map their global supply chains in a way in which now they have greater clarity on where their vulnerabilities are. Now, knowing where the vulnerabilities are is just the first step, but certainly it's one that matters. And we know that even for the Trump administration, managing to get these players, not only in Asia but in Europe, that control specific niches, very advanced production equipment, the most advanced chemicals and other inputs, is essential. The Trump administration, the Biden administration, the United States on its own cannot really take on the challenge of competing with China technology. I think that Professor Chen mentioned that, Dr. Chen mentioned that in our panel. So I think that the United States also should be paying attention as to how South Korea, Taiwan, and Japan are formulating their strategies, because they occupy different niches in these semiconductor supply chain. They have different bureaucratic capabilities, and their geopolitics are not identical. Their China equities in the China relationship and the U.S. relationship is going to be different. So I think that that will make for a more informed American foreign policy, understanding these important players. They may not be the bigger, tallest kids on the block, but they certainly matter to the actual dynamics here. And with respect to the U.S.-Taiwan 21st Century Economic Initiative, that is a question mark in the sense that, the Biden administration, when it advanced the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, it advanced it as an executive agreement. It did not have to get congressional consent or a vote, because it does not involve tariff cutting, and the same is the case for the Taiwan Initiative. But what's interesting is that, of course, the initiative of negotiating with Taiwan was also moved as an executive agreement, but post-facto, when the negotiations for the first tranche concluded, Congress said, wait a minute, we, Congress, have the constitutional mandate to negotiate on trade, and we actually like this idea, we like this initiative, and they voted to express support. So to me, that actually, compared to IPEF, leaves the Taiwan track of the negotiation in a better place, in the sense that Congress has spoken in favor of it. Now, what happens in pursuing the second initiative under the Trump administration? Again, as I told you, I have mostly question marks when it comes to talking about trade policy, but at least it's interesting to see that when the IPEF rolled out and Taiwan was not part of it, many people were very discouraged, but by some twist of fate, it could be that this act of Congress could put this initiative in a better place than IPEF.
I'll speak very briefly because I know you all want to hear from Ryan. I did just want to speak to the initial question about weaponized interdependence, and more generally to the point that was related to that about whether Trump's grand vision could backfire. And the answer is, of course, yes. Of course it can backfire, and it very likely will in small cases, and it is only the question of will it backfire in a really grand way that will hurt us in ways that are lasting and significant. I would point from the region that I know best to several examples from President Trump's first term in which his grand vision did backfire. His decision in 2018 to pull the United States out of the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran has left us in a far more precarious position with respect to both influencing Iran's trajectory and with respect to Iran's proximity to nuclear weapons capability. We also saw, for example, his disinterest and disdain for partnerships and alliances in 2019 really set the United States back because President Trump was unwilling to come to the aid of a long-standing and very critical American partner in the region, Saudi Arabia, when its oil facilities came under attack by Iran and its proxies. And that has led to decisions by the Saudis that are in some ways contrary to U.S. interests, including the decision to engage in a rapprochement with Iran, which will constrain President Trump's ability to affect his own vision in his second term. So I think, yes, it can backfire. We have known for many years that the attempt to weaponize the dollar will be a potential risk for us in terms of the role of the dollar as a reserve currency. This is something that has been much talked about in Washington and around the world since the United States in the post-9/11 era began to utilize the financial system and the U.S. role in it in that way. And I think, this is one of the challenges that we have, that we may see these changes happen in a way that's gradual and then all at once. And so I think it's something that we're going to have to watch for as President Trump really does lean into that tool as an instrument of American power. And just one final word on the, sort of fate of the rules-based international order, I would say it's always been a highly imperfect construct, and its salience has been the extent to which important countries in the world are willing to commit to the rules that do exist and to try to create new institutions to deal with challenges as they emerge. And I think that that itself will continue. Over to Ryan.
So Olivia, on your question, my one humble recommendation is to ask the architect of the 21st Century Trade Agreement, who we're honored to have in our presence today, John Dung, Minister Dung, who negotiated the agreement. So thank you for being with us. I hope that you'll share with Olivia your expectations of where this develops. In all honesty, I think that if I was to be analytic and sort of dispassionate about it, as much as I would like to see further chapters be ratified, I think that the double taxation agreement may have a better pathway forward, because it speaks to President Trump's desire to try to attract inbound investment from Taiwan that will spur advanced manufacturing in the United States. And so it aligns with his interests very effectively. And this is the final thought that I'll offer, which is on your question. I think that President Trump will measure himself in 4 years on a few things. One of which is the degree to which he has been able to prevent more conflict from breaking out around the world. And I know that sounds counterintuitive because he speaks with such bluster and bravado, but he's actually very averse to conflict, and he likes to say that he's the leader that will end conflicts, not start them. And part of the reason why I think that he's committed to this is because the United States has just gone through several decades of really unsatisfying wars overseas, and the vice president was involved in the war in Iraq and is very negative about the role of the U.S. military abroad as a consequence of that. The person who was nominated to be the Secretary of Defense was involved in the war and grew very disillusioned through his experience there as well. And so there is a sentiment among a rising generation of leaders that is very averse to the use of military power to try to change the world. So that's one area which I think he will measure himself. The other is the degree to which he has been able to draw in more investment to the United States, build more manufacturing capacity in the United States, and create more jobs in the United States. And we'll see whether or not his approach yields that outcome. It's to be determined, but I think that this is something that is very much on his mind.
Okay, I think time is up. Before I just hand it over to Dr. Cecilia Ross for the closing remark, let me just say that this is actually a true honor for the CIR to host today's event, and we are really honored to have the delegation from the Brookings to join us today, and we are especially want to also thank all the participants who comes to today on a rainy day. And we hope we have in the future to have this opportunity for the further collaboration, and also the opportunity actually to bring closer to the Taiwan's audience with the United States leading think tanks, Brookings.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lian, and for hosting this event. Thank you to all the panelists and to the audience for your questions. I hope the rich discussion today really highlighted the shared, the excitement that comes when we share our scholars and they share their insights, especially with the renowned experts from Tsinghua Institute for Economic Research and, of course, my esteemed colleagues here. So it's been a phenomenal afternoon, and I want to thank you all for being with us here today, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of today's seminar. I'm sure everyone has learned a lot from today's presentation, and we would like to thank all the speakers for sharing their valuable insight with us today. We hope you enjoyed the seminar today, and we're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.